Good afternoon. I'm David Levy. I'm a member of the Electoral Board and chairman of the Electoral Board. And to my left is Betty Gibbs, the secretary of the Electoral Board. And to my right is Stephen Pretzel, a member of the Electoral Board. I call the meeting to order. Shall we start with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Prior to this meeting, we had a closed meeting under Code of Virginia 2.2.711 to discuss security matters and potential liability issues. We do have one motion to come out of that meeting, which we'll consider at the revisit.
We do need to certify that that's all we talked about.
Yeah. Do I have a motion to certify by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, the proposed board meeting were discussed to consider one, only public business lawfully exempted under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and two, only such business matters identified in the motion to close the meeting. Only liability and security matters were discussed in the meeting. Mr. Troxel, how do you vote?
I vote. I affirm that that is all that we talked about.
Ms. Gibbs?
Yes.
And I also certify that that's what we did. Let's move into the approval of the agenda and minutes. An agenda was published on the website for this meeting. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Only so far as we may also talk about precinct 401, item 7.
Relocation? Yes.
Please talk about the backup precinct.
Are we adding that?
I don't know whether we need to add it or just.
He's
We can
I think
include that in E if we want to.
including and such other precincts that may change. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as circulated?
So,
Second,
Second?
all in favor?
we
We have the minutes of 3 meetings. I'm going to go ahead and just have all 3 submitted for the approval of the board. Are there any changes in those minutes that Madam Secretary you proposed? Or is there a motion to approve the 3 meeting minutes, February 1, February 26, and March 4th, 2020?
So
Second.
Second? Yeah. Okay. When you say second, are you asking the question or are you seconding? Okay. Just.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any announcements? I think we're good to go.
Yeah, mine are in my registration form.
Right. Let's move on to the registrar's report. Mr. Pence.
Yeah,
uh,
okay. Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen, just so anyone online can see that. Let's see. Do that. And let's do a slideshow. Okay. Yes, okay. And we have one attendee, you can see on the screen there, Curtis attended. Okay, registrar report for April 8th, 2024. Table of contents, we have a series of reports, list of ongoing projects and statuses, and my announcements and recommendations. I also have some supplemental material which relates to some of the other agenda items the board may have, basically just to help visualize and frame their conversation. All right, first report, registration counts by locality as of April 2nd. You can see the numbers here for yourself, 50,000 active, 259 active voters, 6,534 inactive, and, sorry, go back. And total of 56,793 with 580 military, 131 overseas, and 78 federal. Locality statistics for the month of February. This just gives you a view of what was in and out across the jurisdiction. I'll leave the numbers here speak for themselves. And again, this report will be posted online. Let's see, which of the two? I had one for March and one for February. And it looks like it went down in February, not surprising because we had certain, we had to close off registration as per 22 days ahead of the election. And so you're gonna have a lower number coming in February, and it gets made up in March with more registrations. You can see that again also in the NVRA report. Basically shows that we were down in February from the EMV, which is of course the biggest contributor to our voter registrations, and then of course up again in March after the election.
Just out of curiosity,
Yep.
Dan, these locality statistics, month of February, month of March.
Yes.
Particularly March, do they include same-day registration?
Um,
I mean, I didn't see a column for it, and I do see it in the NVRA report. I just wasn't sure whether or not.
You know, to be honest with you, I'm not certain. I know that this report, you know, we were looking for, trying to figure out every precinct, what was coming in and going out. And it's possible that's not captured here. I can go back and research that question.
It might be in the new category. I don't know. I was just curious.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
Okay.
So I would say for, just a quick thing, 91 and 302, right? But we had, how many same days we had in 301? Do you remember? Either Nancy or Julie, how many same day registrations we had in 302 rather? Approximately.
Approximately, I want to say it was somewhere in the,
76, or
no, like
higher?
170 something.
Okay, so if that's the case, then this 91 new probably doesn't include same day registrations.
Yeah.
The one question I have, do you see any bulgings of our precincts such that we have to reconfigure our precincts? We're only training for a week.
We have to make sure that we don't overrun our numbers for active voters. And so that gives us a little bit of headroom for some of these. It's definitely something we need to keep evaluating from, you know, from month to month. I think 401 has, you know, been one that's been kind of teetering on the edge for a while.
5,010 in this particular.
Yeah.
Well, and 105 is 201 is 5168.
That includes the inactive.
Right. Yeah, locality statistics includes the inactive as well.
So in any event, it is what it is. We just have to keep it on that.
Yes. And it may be that we, you know, can move a line, you know, like
402 only has 1,600.
Right, we may be able to move the line in some cases and make that solution pretty easily, but, you know, it's still gonna be a precinct move for people who are affected by that.
And just because I've been paying attention to the high number of inactives in 302, let's kind of look through it. And if you look at the active voters in 302, that's still it's our 10th largest precinct out of 18. So even with a lot of inactives, the active voters still maintain its place as a very viable precinct.
Okay, any other questions on these numbers? Okay, let's talk about the department budget. I have put, as I usually do, basically a budget performance report into this. A lot of numbers here, which I'll let you peruse at your leisure. I will make some high-level comments.
This is as of the end of March.
Yes, that is correct. So we are, our fiscal year, just as a reminder, is from July to July, right? So we begin on July 1 to June 30th. So we are now, you know, essentially 10 months into our, at March 30th, we still have May, right? April, May, June, 3 months to go till we finish our fiscal year.
75%.
We're 75% through our year. And, you know, we had a little conversation, I guess Doc had a question about some of the ones that are, you know, at above 75%, some of the items here. My response on that is, yes, I think it's a good idea to look at that just to kind of have a feeling for, you know, where we're hotter versus colder on our spending. However, the more important number really is the number down here at the bottom, which is, you know, our overall spend, right? Which is, you know, between the Electoral Board and the registrar is about 86%. So we're just a little bit high on what we probably would want to spend on a fiscal year basis. And the reason it's important that we look at the total numbers, because at the end of the day, the city doesn't really care. You know, if you're over on one thing and under on another, as long as your total number ends up being pretty much where your budget wanted to be, that's kind of what they care about. You know, from our perspective as Electoral Board and registrar, obviously we want to look at the more details. And I think we can continue to do that. But from the city's perspective, they just want to make sure you get your big number. Now, having said that, there's another piece to this, which is we are in a year, a fiscal year, in which we have 3 elections, right? So we, you know, our November 2023 election, our March 5th election, 2024, and we have another election, June 18th, 2024. So we still have some spending to go. We essentially are about 2/3 of the way, you know, through the election stuff that we have to do. And so one of the things that, you know, comes along with this whole package is how the city does their budgeting, is that they have every department submit a budget budget request essentially every quarter if you need it. So I've submitted a budget request, which we'll look at in a moment, for Q3 of this year. And it essentially, what it does is it matches what we expect our spend to be for the March 2024 election. So while the city doesn't credit us back for, you know, the money the state gives us, it does let us make a request. And the goal is essentially to request from the city as much money as you're going to spend and get back from the state, right? So we try to make everything line up, but of course it's not quite as one for one as you like. I see with a quizzical look on her face. Should I run that by you again?
Yes, because I was thinking when you said we have 3 elections to pay for, I thought, well, the state is paying for one, so.
The state is paying for one, but the reason I say it the way I said it is because we pay for it and the state pays us back.
Doesn't pay us, it pays the city.
It pays the city.
Oh, and then we have to ask for the money.
Correct, from the city. So, but I have to ask for the money from the city ahead of time. And then I have to ask the state for the money after time. And ideally, those two things line up.
In terms of our budget, did the budget include the anticipated federal election expenditures?
No,
So they're on top of this budget.
correct.
Are the expenditures that are the federal election, the federal primary, included in this budget?
So the expenditures that we've expended so far to date include everything, including what we spent on the March
So
5th election. However, what we don't have is the Q3 budget enhancement or budget request.
right.
That's not journaled in here at this point because for two reasons. One is because the city council has to approve all of those, right, which hasn't happened yet. So once that happens, then the finance department will journal that money into our report. And the second thing that has to happen is that I have to submit, this is by April 12th, to the state, what, we actually spent on the election, so they can hopefully reimburse us for all of that.
But ultimately, our expenditures probably are more than our city budget right now.
Yes, so part of the reason why we're hot is because
we
we've
have
spent
not
more
got the
money
revenue.
and we haven't had money put back into the budget.
And that will show up on the revenue side of the budget.
So probably not, right? And that's why I say it the way I say it. What this shows, by the way, and I'll show you, we'll go down to the next slide in a minute, but what this shows you is that the money that was allocated by the city council, that's a whole separate, set of money, the $100,000, that's been journaled into this, right? But the third quarter budget amendment has not been journaled into this. But they will journal that in and actually just, it'll be a budget amendment on that second column
And
there.
that amendment will include the new revenue from the federal
Well,
election.
So the reason I'm hesitating to answer yes to that question is because there's not a one-to-one matter.
I understand,
Right.
but more or less.
Yes, but the answer is I've already projected what we're gonna spend. And I'm gonna go to the state and get that back, but they should be giving us what I projected.
I think the reason I'm asking about that is it sort of drives whether we have to do cuts or whether we have surpluses to be able to look at the whole picture
Right.
of comparing our city budget to our total revenue and then our expenditures against that.
Right. So I'll say one more comment on that. There's a Q4 budget adjustment as well. And historically, looking back a little bit, I know that in previous years, we overran the anticipated budget by a certain amount of money. I think the last time we were in the meeting, I mentioned like about $63,000 was the overrun. And I'm pretty confident that what happened was they put in a fourth quarter budget request, which is actually after the fact, to cover that overage. So that's just how the process
Well,
works.
the question becomes one, whether in process for this next quarter, for instance, do we make any expenditure adjustments? And I think one of them that we'll be discussing is suggesting to the city that we need to order new machines.
Yes, and I will, let me get to that in this, because I've got some material that you'll want to think about for that.
But right now, you're not suggesting that we adjust our budget.
I'm just telling you what it is, and I'll explain as we keep going through some more slides, a little bit more about what I've just said here. And you can ponder that. So the council did allocate $100,000 to us for whatever contingency we needed earlier this year. I worked with Megan Palmer in the finance department, and basically she did a little bit of a projection. I've got kind of a sort of a summary here. On the left-hand side, you'll see all of the budget for personnel. There's very little we can do with that. That's all pretty much mandated as to how that works. On the right-hand side, we see a bunch of other different categories where we spend money. Her estimate was based on our spend at this time, that she wanted to go ahead and journal in that whole $100,000 into our budget, which she did. And basically, this is the breakout of where she thought we were gonna be, over our budget. And by the way, this is once again an estimate. This is just that she said, okay, well, look at your run rate, I'm gonna make an estimate, and this is what she came up with. I think, just as a side comment, the city departments never leave money on the table that the council allocates to them, right? So I think she made an estimate based, but I'm not saying it wasn't a good faith estimate, I'm sure it was. But I just think that one way or another, the finance department was gonna make sure this money went into our budget. I don't think that was an option. I think that was gonna happen. So this is how they did it with this. So that's the description of what they decided to do, where they thought we might be over or under. And we went ahead and just gone ahead and rolled that money into the budget. So that's just so you know that journal entry has been done. My budget adjustment request for the third quarter, which was based on the presidential primary. By the way, this is awesome. I couldn't adjust this. It was a picture, that's why I didn't fix it. I estimated that, and the categories are rough categories. I estimate we'd be spending around 66,000 and a half, maybe 66,500 in our presidential election. This was based on previous years. I just basically looked at previous years and said, well, okay, I think that's what we spent before, so I'm going to guess that we're going to spend somewhere around that this time. And that was a budget request. So this is something that hasn't been journaled into our budget at this time, but will be after they approve the third quarter request. And this is my preliminary and hopefully final application to the state for reimbursement. The complexity here is, of course, they break it down differently than our finance system breaks it down. So,
Dan, do you think you could make the size of that stuff bigger on the screen?
yeah, maybe I can. Hang on a second. Maybe I can.
That's
Good. That's a good question. I'm gonna lose some. I'm gonna lose.
That's better.
Take the header down.
Take the header down.
If you
I
put
mean,
it in
just
presentation.
scroll up.
Yeah.
Take the header off too.
Cut at the top.
Did that work better? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. Anyway, so they break it down differently in their version of how they want you to submit their, the costs. So I did the best I could to kind of make it, line up. And essentially I came out pretty close to what, our internal accounting was. I think it was about $3 off, $2 off, something like that. But that's pretty much, where we spent the money and how we're gonna go to the state and ask for money back. Let me go to the next slide, which shows you, where was it? I had another, I think it's further down. Yeah, here it is. I'll jump back a little bit, but this is the one that we did internally. So this is based on the city system with all their geo codes, how they allocate it. And you see I'm about $70,012 in the right-hand side there. And you can see how it broke down for what we pay different vendors and for different things, how we spent for our personnel, how it broke out from early voting and election day. But the total 70,012 is pretty much what I'm asking for from the state, about the same amount. Okay. Questions on that? Let's talk a little bit about the dual presidential primary. So here's our turnout numbers. In early voting, we only had 137 Dem, 302 Republican. So not a huge turnout in early voting.
Question,
Sure.
3.89% is total voters of the 56,396 who came to the Democratic primary.
Correct.
0.5%. So basically, our total turnout was approximately 13 and a fraction.
Adding those two figures.
Yes. Well,
So
total turnout.
13 and a fraction percent of the
Yes, the
voters
percent, yes, percentage
showed
wise,
up
yes.
to vote for one primary.
That's correct. That is correct. Yep. And absentee voting, just to follow up on your point, we actually had 990 Democrat ballots come back, 337 Republican. I'll talk a little bit about what we sent out in a moment. But it's interesting that our absentee voting turnout was for the Democrat, vote, that primary, almost half of them were absentee ballots. So I thought that it was interesting. But it was a lower turnout in the absentee percentage-wise from the Republican ballots. But the numbers down below, 56,000 voters and 2195 for Democrats and 5355 for Republicans. That's the overall turnout. Yeah, so wanted to talk a little details about how we worked out what we're going to do. We had other registrars asking or suggesting, said that we order 100% for Dem and 100% for Republican based on, their idea that it's going to be a very heavy election. That would have been about 56,000 times 2, 112,000 ballots, which would have cost about $28,000. We were a little skeptical of that, analysis. And so we did some historical analysis and came out with maybe 50%, giving some clearance to Democrats, 70% Republican. And then when we did our initial order for early voting, we actually just have that to make sure we didn't kind of go all in on that number even at that point. Low turnout in early voting indicating we would not need the full 50% Dem and 70% Republican. I broke it out by precinct. I didn't put that slide in here, so it's a little too much mind-numbing detail, but we ended up reducing that second half order, and the final ballot cost ended up being $11,315, which is, a savings of 28,000 minus 11,315. So I'm happy, and the vendors I was working with told me you're smarter than a lot of our other jurisdictions because they ended up getting a lot more ballots. So
Jan, what's our order due for June?
So our vendor typically is able to turn ballots around probably within a week to 2 weeks. We will not be able to order ballots until we know what's on the ballot coming from the elect. So they're promising to give us that information within a week or so of April 9th. So that means probably the earliest we could even do that is going to be middle of April. We have to start early voting on May 3rd. So that means that we should be ordering those ballots a couple weeks ahead of that, right? So I would say probably the third week of April is when we're going to be sending out that initial order for early voting.
Are we going to need any direction with the word on the number of ballots?
I'm happy to have your thoughts on that. I think our next meeting is on May 2nd, right? So if you want to have a meeting to talk about that, I'm happy to do that, after the middle of April. Or if you want to do that offline, I'm happy to do that too.
You might simply send out your thoughts to
Sure.
the board members. I don't know that we need a special meeting.
If all we're going to do is just sign off on the number of ballots in the first order.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to hold a meeting. I just think we need to agree with your estimates.
Yeah.
Or question one, whichever one works.
Yeah.
I don't think we need a vote.
Okay. Okay.
I think the individual members can react to your suggestions.
Okay. And I'm happy, by the way, in our May 2nd meeting to tell you, to kind of lay out the detail of whatever analysis we have. Remember, we still don't know for sure which is going to be a dual primary or single primary, right? So there's still a bunch of stuff that's kind of open.
There's no way you can give us anything to vote on today because you don't have enough information.
I don't, and we know that there's going to be, for example, in Ward 4, there's likely to be, there's going to be a Republican primary in Ward 4, and that may be a hot primary. I don't know, right? So, and maybe some of the other boards will not have such a, you know, may
At
not
least
have
not
a primary at
local.
all, right? Or may not have
But you are gonna have congressional.
congressional.
At least on the Republican
Yep.
side.
At least,
Equally on the Democrat side as
Yep.
well.
that's correct.
So, yeah, but we can see from the $11,000 figure for the cost of ballots and stuff, that it's not an inconsiderable expense.
It's not. We do have budgeted, you know, a good amount in our budget for that. But I didn't want to eat it all up if we could help that, right? So.
Exactly. And it's a headache to have a lot of extra
And
ballots.
it's a headache to have a lot of extra ballots too. It's a whole other point, yeah. Okay, absentee ballot statistics and costs of that, just to break that out as its own item. You can see that we sent, I would say, look on the top left there, about, almost three times, about three times the number of Democratic absentee ballots as Republicans. Our total is about 2,300, which is a little bit less than we had. We broke 3,000, I think, in the November election. So it's a little less than we had in a general election. And we had about 4% of them undeliverable. About half of them were returned via, more than half were returned by mail, and we had about 7%, 5%, 7% returned via Dropbox. About 1% of them were late. And we did have, you know, basically a third on both sides that were unreturned. So, and that, by the way, that does track also with what we happened in November. We were about 60-something% return in November. Cures, just so you're aware, we had the cure process. Some ballots come back that have material problems that they could not be counted unless they were solved. We reached out to voters. We got 22 of the 57 cured, but 35 we were not able to get the voter to return it in time or to return it. So those were not able to be cured. You can see on the right-hand side what it cost us to, what it costs to do the mail out. The postage is included in that top number, the 8,700 number. I just listed the other invoices that we had because they printed some stuff for us to use in-house after the initial mailing. And the grand total for that was, you know, $9,481.73. If you take out the postage, which was $2,800, it leaves you with a cost for the vendor to just do the service of about $6,500. And just looking at the previous mail out, the vendor that we had before, Fort Orange Press, we were paying postage of about 95% per piece. And that's, I'm saying that because remember, we had one cost on the mail out, we had another cost on the mail back. So averaging it all out came out to about 95 cents. On this mail out, our cost per piece was about 64 cents on each mail transit. The other advantage we found with Print Elect this time was that we really got our first ballots back within a week. We were having people drop them in the Dropbox within literally a couple of days, within a week, which means they actually got them in their mailbox, were able to vote them and then bring them back. And last time it was a good 2 weeks before we started seeing anything back, maybe a little more. And the vendor cut, just by changing vendors, we were able to cut the cost from $363 per ballot down to $280 per ballot. So it improved our cost.
I think we had talked a little bit at one point about some enhanced language about encouraging people to drop the absentee ballot at the Dropbox from the mailing back.
Yeah, so that's a good idea, except here's the dilemma. In this round, I went ahead and had them meter all of the return envelopes. So, because it seemed like, you know, the previous, and if you do the, what's it called, the bulk mail, the business reply mail, sorry, that's what I'm trying to say, business reply mail, that would work to maybe reduce your costs, but because now you're not paying that business reply mail. But the problem is the business reply mail cost is 3 times your actual postage, right? So it's 64 cents. That was, it's really 66 cents for first class. They, by virtue of their bulk, rate, got it down to 64 cents.
So it really doesn't make that much.
And here's the number that I learned in the last round, which is at 60+% of a return, you actually start to lose money on that return, right? If I only got 30%, like these numbers were reversed and I only got 30% back, then the business reply mail would make sense, because then of course I would say, yeah, get as many in the drop box as you can, because that'll save us money on every one of them. But without having that business reply mail come back at a lower rate, you end up paying 3 times the amount for each return.
It's sort of backwards.
Yeah, I didn't expect that round, but anyway, live and learn. Okay, I think I went over this already. You looked at this, I think. All right, any questions on what I've done so far? Good so far? All right. Ongoing projects, let's go back. We are still in the process of updating security in the registrar's office via the grant money that's coming via Homeland Security. City Emergency Management, Piper from that department is working with us on getting all that stuff filed. I saw she actually filed some additional material for them this week, actually today. So that's continuing to work. Actually, the review of security upgrade for the county and registrar's office actually has made some progress, which I'll show you when we get down to that a little bit later. I still would like this to, as a registrar electoral board, to work on a separation of duties document. I do think there's a outline of that in the Greb handbook, and I think we should, just like we've done an election officer manual and other manuals for various things, I think we should have a registrar's manual that would help to outline some of those differences. Relocation of precinct 204. Basically, we've approved that, and now the AG approval has been obtained. So we have got the precinct change notices kind of queued up with BMS. They're going to be sending those out for us. I have a call with them tomorrow to try to kind of get through the details of that. And that will happen, I think, what do we say? Middle of May, to make sure we're in line with the, can't send before, can't send after. It's a 15-day cutoff. You have to send before. Page program restart. This is something that Julie's still working on. So she can share about that whenever we come back to that. The LESS program approval, we are taking care of that today. Backup precinct review and approval. You've seen some material on that. I think we'll be working on that over the next little bit. And ongoing upgrade of ballot scanning equipment. And that's something that I have some additional slides on when you guys are ready to talk about that. Okay, let's jump into that. Freedom Vote Scanner worked well with early voting, and an upgrade of OVO scanners to FES should be considered. Why? Reasons are FES is faster than OVO, meaning we have less undervote problems when voters undervote their ballot and leave a precinct without actually getting it in the machine. There is an integrated hard shell case with the FES. It protects the screen better, which we've seen is the most vulnerable element that breaks on the OVOs with unfortunate regularity. FES has an internal battery backup, reduces the need for an external UPS. FES systems share software with the OVO, reducing the need for training election officers or me. The FES system will be upgradable to the new elect standards when those are published. That's a 2.0 standards, which are in process. They've actually been approved, and vendors are now coding to that new standard. The FES system will be able to go to that when it is required. OVO units are fully depreciated. The city's asset list due to their age. They were been in use since 2015. The FES ballot box adapters allow the use of existing ballot bins, so that saves us a little bit there. It also uses the same media. It's got the same TM, the little memory stick. The vendor that we use, Elected Services Online, it's a pretty good customer service record. They're probably the easiest vendor to work with of the vendors we work with. And I mentioned FES ballot scanner will be accommodating the new elected VVSG 2.0 standard. Not clear that the OVO will be able to do that or be certified for that. I did check with a competitor, Vanguard. Their pricing for their unit, their comparable unit is pretty much exactly the same Unisys FVS system after the price increase, which is coming July 1. So I say that just to say, if we manage to decide to do this and commit to the purchase before July 1, we'll realize the savings that I'll talk about in a minute. One issue I have raised with the vendor and needs to be addressed before we purchase additional units is the exposure of that power switch on the back of the case. So I don't know, you guys, if you remember, the unit has this hard shell case that closes, and that's all good. Everything is nice and tight inside it. The only thing that's exposed actually is a power switch, which is on the back. And if you set that case down wrong, rock it a little bit, don't set it right, you can trip that power switch, which means that it turns on, nothing bad happens except that it just sits there and waits and runs down the power for the battery backup. So that means, when you go turn it on again, it will recharge, plug it in, turn it on, it will recharge. But if you had a problem, say, for example, first thing in the morning, when you, come into the precinct, you start up, it's 7:30, right? Whatever time it takes that thing to recharge, and power goes out, then you may not have a good charge on your original UPS. So I told them this is a killer. We can't do this unless you figure this out. And I don't think I'm the only one that complained about this. Anyway, so they went back to their hardware supplier and they came up with this retrofit, which I've showing you in these two pictures. Essentially, you can see the switch right here. That's in the middle there. That's exposed. They have a little piece, a unit that goes over top, plugs into the plug, because that's not being used for power, obviously. And it goes over and protects that switch from being tripped. So it's a pretty simple retrofit. Makes sense. I was impressed with their, and the elegance of it, shall we say. So I think that's
How
going to work.
secure is it when it's in place?
So that's the right question, and the only way I will be comfortable with the right answer to that is once I get one in my hand and I put it in there and I put the thing down and see what happens, right? So that's the right question.
Well, they can recess the switch, so you have to stick your finger inside.
Yeah, so there are other solutions to this, right? I think this was the cheapest solution, probably as a vendor. That's how they're thinking about how do I fix this cheaply. So I've asked them obviously to send me a few of these so I can look at it, try it, at least one or two, so I can put it on the machines that I have and bang it around a little bit gently, make sure I don't trip the switch. So anyway, just for full transparency, that's where that stands. So here's something that we could consider. So I'm giving you basically an outline of what we might do and how it might cost. Proposed plans to replace 26 OVO units with a total of 24 FPS units. 2 already purchased, net 22 more. The reason I'm suggesting we drop down from 26 to 24 is because I think that in any one election, and I'm open to your thoughts on this, the chances of us using, we have essentially 18 precincts. We at one point maybe put multiple OVOs at 302, but I think that's not seeming like that's going to be needed immediately in the near future. So I'll leave this with 18. We used to use this also for CAP. Now we're using the OBCS for CAP, high-speed scanner. So I think with 18 precincts, essentially that gives us 6 additional units, which is essentially a third of our overall plan.
This last election, did we have called to use one of our backup units?
So we actually had called to use one of the OVOs and one of the OVIs. In both cases, I had the technicians retrieve those units from the precinct. We fired them up and they had no problems. So my conclusion is it was something that
Operator.
the operators were struggling with for whatever reason. They didn't understand what they were doing, but anyway, more training. So anyway, so I'm proposing that we actually drop down from 26 to 24. And we purchased 2, and that would leave us down 22 more. Unison will be increasing the cost of the machine from $6,400 to $7,360 as of July 1. That's why this makes this a decision that we should make sooner rather than later, potentially, possibly. And like I mentioned before, competitive vendors are pricing their machines at the higher number here when they become available, which will be after July 1. Committed orders before July 1 can be made at the existing price. The total cost, if we did that, would be $140,800. Later, that cost would be $161,920, net of $20,000 difference. Purchase of new voting equipment is not included in the 2025 budget. We would need to go to the city and tell them that we would need additional money. The board were to approve this plan, city council will need to have this on the agenda May 10th for review, May 30th and June 11th to meet the deadline of July 1. So we would need to move forward on this by the latest May 10th if we decided to go
So
make that request.
That's why it's on the agenda for today. is to-
That's why you're able to review it. So I'm assuming that you could make a decision. You wouldn't have to make it today. You could
There's
make it.
no potential for a grant or reimbursement from the feds.
I did investigate that, and at this point in time, no one from the state has indicated that they're gonna have any grant money available. But yes, I did ask that question. I can keep asking the question. I can see if there's anything that someone hasn't thought about,
Well,
but
it's an obvious question for the city.
yeah, and I think the other point is, and this would be a point I would raise in that conversation, that the state is requiring us at some point, and maybe not, this year, but at some point to go to a new standard. And that means they will be requiring all of the vendors to meet that standard. And that most likely means the vendors are gonna be coming up with new equipment. They're not gonna want to retrofit their old equipment. And that's also the problem. That
How old are the units?
we purchased them in 2015.
They're 8 years old. 9.
Yeah, about 9 years old, and they are fully depreciated essentially in the city asset list.
Are the May 10th, 30th, and June 11th dates something that, that's when the city council is going to take a look at those? Or if we were able to get this to them at the last meeting in April, they can begin to look at them?
I think if we make a decision by the May 2nd meeting, that will be sufficient time to meet this time. This is the time I'm giving you by finance. That's what they suggested. That's the timeline. So,
This is a very well thought out layout of this, because I was still 2015
yes,
doing this thing and shocked the city manager at that point, but anyway. But now that I was asking
Yeah.
for. The one thing you haven't mentioned is the fact that if you make the July 1st deadline and implement these new machines, it will be right before a presidential election. And the training for staff right before a presidential is going to be very intense on the mechanics of the election itself, the election process. Throwing a new voting system on top of that gives me a little bit of pause. So I'm thinking about that. But I just wanted to point that out.
absolutely. So those are fair points. So one of the questions I asked the vendor was, okay, so what's the new software going to look like versus the old software? And they said it looks pretty much the same. We don't expect to have a lot of training questions. Now, I happen to have in the room here, someone who actually was working in early voting as election officer. And if you're okay to ask that question, I would ask, how did you feel about the new machine versus the old machine?
I thought it was great, man. No problems, no issues.
Well, we had 2 machines in
Correct.
operation.
Correct. Use them in early voting here for that exact reason, to see if the vendor was telling something.
It's just a consideration that we had, because in 2015, we had at least a little bit more time.
Yes.
Training is a very real consideration. That's for
Yes.
sure.
I know.
Yeah, so, and by the way, if the board decides that we want to defer this, I don't have a horse in this race. I'm fine with whatever they decide. I just want to point out that At some point, we'll need to probably get machines that meet the new standard. I don't think the OVOs will meet the new standard. It's gonna happen at some point.
Well, we'll have this discussion at the agenda.
Yeah, okay, yep, that's fine. Yep, sounds good. And the OVO units being decommissioned, we need to have a secure disposition. I've talked to Elect about this, and then I have to talk with them or other people further about how to do it. Security grant update, this is basically how the layout that was drawn for us would look. This is the top view at the bottom there, and a side view from on the right-hand side. Essentially, there's a work window. We have to get it complete by July, maybe October. I actually have two different points in here because I had a question for Piper. I didn't get sorted out. But we have a work window, maybe first week of July through September 19th. And that's based on, early voting and getting voted done on in the June election. And then November 15th through May 1st would be probably the only other window that we would have to get this done by, if it's July, by July of 2025.
Just out of curiosity, on which side of that does the public come up?
The side you see that you are walking, as if you're walking in the front door. That's how it looks on the right-hand
Okay,
side.
so the public comes up to the bottom side of the top down.
On the right-hand side drawing. So if you were
Well, I'm
standing,
talking about the left side drawing, the public comes up on the bottom side.
yes, that's correct, yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
just want to make sure
Yes.
there's enough space on the countertop with that plexiglass in place so that so that the staff could have their equipment, et cetera.
Yeah, so we did have a kind of a longish conversation about that. And so we have pass-throughs designed so that, someone can come up, they can, have someplace where they can actually write on something and they can pass it through. And the person on the other side of the counter will be able to take that and also have a laptop that we use the laptops for early voting still. And they could be able to do that.
Now, is that going to be clear plexiglass
Yes.
or white as it shows in there?
Yeah, clear plexiglass. I think that's just a feature of the drawing program. That
And
they
you
have.
said it's 18 inches tall so that authorized observers, authorized representatives can hear what they're saying across the top.
Correct. That was the big concern with a kind of a uniform I mean, there's two concerns. I think the contractor was concerned with the plexiglass being too floppy and not being able to be braced as well. And so that's why he was more favorable toward this, in-out design, because he felt like it would have a lot more stability. We were concerned about the ability to communicate. We felt that the holes would be not very good for voters, not big enough for the voters and not big enough for, not when you couldn't hear the voter from the authorized representative wherever they were sitting. They wouldn't be able to hear both sides of the conversation. So, and also we, just from experience, we know we talk to voters who put their ballot in, we have a ballot officer sitting out there, but sometimes, you need to have a conversation with the voter across the top of the plexiglass. So that's why we wanted it not be quite as high. However, we did try and make sure that it would be difficult to get over. So one of the problems I think that we talked about was the taller plexiglass situated more in the middle of the counter would still allow someone to climb on the counter and go over if there was such a intent. This makes it a little bit harder because the plexiglass is positioned most of it is positioned right outside, right at the edge of the counter. So there's no place to climb and go over. It's kind of, and by the way, the model for this was what we had in the judges' chambers. So if you go over to the circuit court, we were talking about how the judge has how's their partition set up for security. And this is similar to what they do there. So that was part of the model that was under discussion.
Moving on.
Moving on. This just basically is just documents that we talked about the local election security standards review, and that we have a deadline to submit by March 1st, your approval. And then I'm going to end my part of this and let you talk about whatever else you need to talk about meeting with this. Registrar's announcements and recommendations. We have LNA testing for early voting scheduled for April 30th, that is the early voting LNA test. And that's, I'm looking for party chairs and or author representatives to come, as well as electoral board members who can make it. We have a regular election day LNA testing scheduled for May 16th. It's 9 to 12. First day of early voting is May 3rd, and as always, we'll be open from 9 to 5 weekdays throughout early voting, and 9 to 5 the 2 Saturdays before election day. I'm recommending that we use print elector absentee ballot mail out for the upcoming June primary election based on what we saw in this last election. Training for new election officers, we have tentatively marked for the 3rd week of May and the 2nd week of June for chiefs and assistant chiefs. This was something I think out of your thoughts, Doc, around when you would be available and some others would be available. One other thing I think you're going to talk about is June 19th holiday. City office will be closed. Registrar's office should be closed for regular business, but because it's during canvass, you should decide whether we're going to continue through canvass on Juneteenth. And cap pre-processing tentatively scheduled to be in the week of June 10th. And that is all I have for my report.
Extensive report. Report has been received.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to old business? What is the status of the relocation of precinct 204 to Bass? Is there anything further?
Yeah, basically what I mentioned in the report, which is that we have received Attorney General, no objection letter. We have got the council. We've done the public notification. The only step right now essentially is to notify voters. And so that's the stage we're at. And I'm expecting to talk to BMS about that mail out tomorrow and sort that out this week. It's would be slated to go actually out the door. I think I said the middle of May, right?
Do I and you or a member of your staff need to go talk to the principal at Bass and start looking at space?
Yeah, I think it's not a bad idea. I mean, we always do precinct visits ahead of time, but I think, because this is our first time around, it wouldn't hurt for that to happen. Yeah, absolutely.
If you could reach out to this.
The principal there, yeah, see if we can schedule a visit.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay, good. Any further old business? Shall we move on to new business? And the first item is approval of West security standards. Do I have a motion on the submission and certification?
We use some verbiage in the closed session. If I can remember, I would make it part of the motion.
Well, we introduce that to approve the submission and certification.
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor? Motion is passed. Okay. Dan, thank you very much for the hard work on the last submission. The OBO and whether we move to replace the OBO machines now. Is there any readiness to have a motion on the machines?
I discussed first before the motion. I don't think there's any question we're going to need to replace them. And getting to use them during LNA testing, it's like, a horse and buggy versus a Ferrari so far as speed is concerned. And just all of the other enhancements to it. I think at some point, we're going to need to make that transition. And I think $21,000 savings tells us when we need to make that transition.
I think the difficulty here for the city will be to see this large expenditure without somebody pointing a pistol at the city's head to do it.
So for whatever it's worth, I had a chance to look at, I think I may have sent this to you, Eddie, I don't know if you even saw it, but the Megan Palmer sent out around to the city department heads all of the budget adjustments that everyone in the city was requesting. And I felt a little bit bad about a $66,000 budget adjustment request until I saw the ones for $500,000. Then I felt better. That said, it's still a lift, right? And I think the argument, if we have an argument on this, is would you like to pay $140,000 or $170,000? Approximately. And see if that advances the cause.
I lean toward submitting a request at this time for not only the reason it's placing, but also because we have to create a history with the city council. This is, even if it's not, it's not.
Yeah, I don't think we need to keep this in our back pocket at this point.
Right. So, I would be prepared to make a motion that you submit a request for, as you stated, for the 24 machines. That you're down to the 26. We have 22.
We have to.
We have two. 22 machines. So my motion would be to submit a request for 22 machines.
Well, FBS,
FDS.
and I would second
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
that.
Aye. It's passed. Shall we move on to election day signage at precincts? Dan, you want to explain where we are right now?
Sure. So what I wanted to do, just, I know you wanted to have this conversation. And on the left-hand side here is St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which I think is of particular interest right now. So I just basically got, it wasn't Google Maps, it was another application that the city has for GIS. Anyway, I used this to just kind of take a snapshot from above. And I figured if you wanted to talk about signs, you'd want to look at, a visual of what they look like. This is just a couple precincts I did. And also what I wanted to do was to ask the guys from the city, the technicians who actually place these signs, to tell me, hey, about where do you place signs? What, if you go to place signs in precincts, where do you do it, right? So I went ahead and took a couple pictures. This is St. Paul's Episcopal, Sandusky. The red marks obviously are where they place signs and where they say they place signs. And so I want to at least let you have that for your perusal so you can.
Well, as I remember, particularly for St. Paul's.
Yeah.
The problem was the placement of signage at the street, the side street especially.
Where you couldn't turn because it was one way going.
Right.
One way.
Yes.
And we put signs up on, what was it, Church Street? And, I mean, it was one way, the wrong way.
It's an awkward precinct.
We had discussed at that time, right after Election Day, that we needed more standing signs to put in difficult places. We need a few more either sawhorse type signs or standing poles type signs. And really, it's a matter of just approving the purchase of a few more signs.
And I think part of the solution is what the signs say, because if you look at Sandusky, you see the two towards the bottom that are right across the road from each other. I think they brought those out later because people were complaining they couldn't see. If right over on the right-hand margin, I think it's Sand Hill, the sign that was out there, I was on the intersection before I saw the sign because they had placed it so far back from Sand Hill that you couldn't really see it. But in addition to moving it further out so people can see it, we need signs down at the other entrance where people normally come in that says vote that way. Instead of having them go down the drive and give them a sign that says, that directs them to a new location. Because there were a lot of people that parked over in the big parking lot and then walked. We might also want to put something there, particularly at Sandusky, telling them that they could park in the bus lane. The school's not in session, that would work. Down in that wide area where the bottom red dot is on Sandusky, there's plenty of room for disabled people. When school's not in session, there's actually several more parking places there, but the day we were there, school was in session and they had to leave the delivery door open so they could get deliveries into the cafeteria, which is right there. But, you know, we need more than just standard vote here signs. We need some other types of signs.
Yeah, Julie, why not throw in some questions?
Yeah, I have a few suggestions for that. I would like permission, if we're gonna order new signs, because when I don't stand that I order signs that say different things. So instead of the signs that we have now is vote here with red arrows, which I think I need more with red arrows.
Yeah.
So more of those, but then also some signs that either say election precinct here. We put those in front of the doors, especially for the ones that are newer, or even at the edge of the street. So it's not just vote here, but like there's an election precinct here, and put a number on it, and then how you
Or
want to
precinct polling place.
Exactly, we can figure out where they,
Yeah.
as well as maybe some signage. We have ones that are smaller for the handicap that go in orange cones at the parking.
Yeah, that's-
But I was thinking we could also potentially get some of the same size as the vote here that says either voter parking or election day parking to try to designate for some of those things like Sandusky would move, that this is a voting parking area.
Yeah.
If you're trying to combat that as well. So that might solve half of that issue, but at the end of the day, it's also the voters and the people and everything like that we can't control, but we want to
Yeah.
fix the issue with wording.
I grant you, some people will drive right past a sign that says, don't come in here, and they will drive right past it. But they can't complain if we put proper signage up. And I don't think we have proper signage on these things. And that's what I'm trying to fix, is to make sure we have proper signage, which I think we're going to need to take another step.
Do we call on our election day chiefs to carry these
So,
signs?
yeah, so that's a good question. What I'm trying to do is to get our city technicians have been very good about getting signage out there. I'm trying to be reasonable with what we ask them. Maybe not many more signs, but maybe more specific signs and a little more direction as to where they put them. I think we haven't given them at least recently, a lot of direction about what we want. And I want to be sensitive to they've been doing this, and they have a sense of, what things need, but at the same time, I think the sense that the board has that maybe our signage wasn't exactly the way we want it to be, something we can give them some more specific direction.
And we have some experienced election workers.
We do.
And, chiefs that really can be a resource.
Yeah.
It's conceivable. It's not like they have enough to do, but maybe have the assistant chief make sure the signage is where it needs to be, and
Yeah.
have a proper sign.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean, looking at the right on Sandusky, you see it's a long walk from the roadway all the way down to the precinct. And if I can get the city technicians to do that, that's better for, I think.
Yeah, the assistant chief would have to take the car to go to some of those places. I would not expect them to walk out there by any stretch.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you about Linkhorn. My wife called because one of her adult students and that student's husband, who's a doctor, went to Linkhorn to vote, and they could not find any signs anywhere. So I don't know what happened there, and that was the only time that he could vote. She went back and voted later, but her husband never got to vote because they couldn't find where the precinct was because they couldn't find the signs. So,
There was only a vote here sign out on, what is this? I don't know what that's like. There are two entrances to get into that parking lot.
Yeah.
By precinct.
Yeah,
It was on Crane Hill, and it was tiny.
yeah.
yeah,
And there wasn't even one at the other entrance, which I come from that direction to get there.
I don't go there.
I think that's an issue we might also bring up in the training. Next election.
well, the election officers don't, at this point, the election officers don't have any responsibility for the outside signs. What I would like for us to do is take a map like this and indicate, maybe put letters here and say, sign A goes here, make sure it does this, sign B goes here. We'll need to put another vote here sign at the other entrance. Those kinds of things, I think the training, or at least the instructions for the technicians so that they can improve what they're doing. And, make sure that we have the proper signs to direct people to their voting places. Now, like Heritage Methodist there, there's a small sign down where the red dot is, and there's a vote here sign up by the fellowship hall. And that's pretty much all you need at Heritage Methodist. Because, it's pretty straightforward there. I mean, there's two entrances. But from the first entrance, you can see the vote here sign at the second entrance. So I'm not sure we need to do anything there. It's just some other places. So if we could go and look at just an overhead of each of the places and mark where we think signs need to be and see if the technicians would be willing to
Well,
move them for us.
maybe, Dan, you can have Julie work on that.
Sure. Julie, you have something to say, right?
Yeah, I also think one of the things is size of the signs.
Yeah,
Because the only size of the vote here or like the vote here with an arrow is a very small size. So even if we order a different verbiage, I would still like permission to get larger signs, even if it's just for the ones that go on the roads. So they're easier to see.
it should at least be the size of a Camden yard sign,
Yeah.
at least.
Do we need any sort of motion at this point? on this issue?
Just look at ideas for sign sizes and wording and all that.
Yeah, I think what we're looking for is maybe the May meeting to have some feedback on what we do about signage.
Can I say something about unicorn? People would come up and they'd go to those two main double doors. So often we used to have to tell them they have to walk around the back.
Which is where they always
Right.
go.
Yeah, I mean, it was easy to get into the parking
Yeah.
lot, but then once they came up, they would often go to the double doors.
I would suggest that once Julie or whoever provides a satellite image of each of our precinct places, that the electoral board member responsible for their 6 precincts and the chief be invited to come in and take a look. Where do you think signs should be so that people can find where they vote? So that a new person could find
I
their.
think we could do that by email with our chiefs, but I think you're right. We as,
Yeah, because the chiefs hear everything when people come in and complain that, boy, I had to walk all over, sure Rob's got a lot of that. But I think, I mean, either just have a notebook there so that you can come in and just do your precinct. So, and explain it to Julie or, I mean, some chiefs are not as computer adept as other chiefs and they might have difficulty trying to get a dot drawn. They don't
well,
have all the
it's not so
applications.
much as a dot drawn, it's just knowing what the issue is.
Right. So basically, if Julie is in charge of the signage issue, they can explain to Julie what they think
What we had,
the solution is.
what we had the technicians do for this, we actually took a picture, we gave them a red marker and said, show us where you put the sign. That's what they did. So,
Yeah,
we can do the same thing in reverse and say, this is where we want the sign.
That's
yeah,
One more thing to think about all this is, I think part of our dilemma this time was precincts were in different places because school was in session.
Right.
So I would say, as we do this analysis, we should think about the fact that this, election on the 18th is going to have no school in session. And then, November will have no school in session. So right now, we're looking at this and remembering the past election, but it will be different locations in some places the next election. So something to think about as well.
Well, at Sandusky, Roz made the comment that she preferred the new location better than the lobby.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I think it might be wise for us to move it there, so the signage there would be
Yeah.
really important. Because one complaint that we had in November, we had somebody come in, and I happened to be there, and they said, that walkway is too steep and too long for somebody with a handicap to come down here. So, if we move it around to the side there, keep it there, that resolves that problem.
Yeah.
Makes it much simpler, so.
They will also have summer school at Sandusky.
Oh, Sandusky, that's right. That's
So
that's right.
when we did our walkthroughs and discussion, they told me that they would have summer school, so most likely we would need to stay in the gym as well, even in the gym,
Yeah,
because of summer school.
and quite frankly, once we get our people used to the idea of going there, I don't want to change them back. And also, if we only have 13% of our voters show up, you're gonna have a whole new crowd in November. So if we're gonna move it around to the auxiliary gym, we really need to make sure that our signage is on par.
One comment I wanted to make on the St. Paul's Episcopal, with a relatively low amount of signs we had there. One of the dilemmas I think we faced this particular time was we had people parking in the upper lot and believing they could enter the church precinct from the upper level. And we really, our whole ADA analysis and plan was, we don't have multiple entrances, for ADA. We have one entrance down at the bottom. And, voters may, I'm not saying we should have a sign that says, don't enter here, but in a way, we kind of make sure that voters don't go to the wrong door, directing the right doors, the right way to do it. But I wonder, particularly for St. Paul's, this, it's possible people see an ADA sign up top there, because I believe they have handicapped access up there, and an elevator that goes down, I believe. And maybe someone who's been a part of the church or knows that believes that they can go in that way, then, hasn't followed the way that we would like.
So I even signage with cones, voter parking, go straight ahead, and then put them down there in the side parking lot there, which is directly behind it, where I've always parked when I go down for events there. And they just have to walk down the alley and around the corner. They can't go in the door there because like 3 steps down. But if they go walk down the alley and around the corner, then it's ADA compliant. And
Yeah, the entrance at the bottom here, the corner at the bottom is the
Yeah.
ADA entrance.
it's one right above church.
Yeah, right
The
above
white
church,
corner, that's where it
exactly.
goes in. But the one,
On the
Right
top,
behind
the
the
red
church,
arrow is, that's not where we
Yeah.
want them to go.
so that's where we need more comprehensive signage to say what they, not only where they do go, but where they don't go.
But as Betty observed, the other problem there is the one on the street,
Yeah.
people approaching it from the wrong direction.
Yeah, because you can't go down the street, you have to go up the street.
Yeah, that vote here sign should probably be down the next block.
Yeah.
And then another one pointing to go down into the upper lot, and then another one pointing down into the back lot, which I know is a long way around. But when they get the ticket, they can't say, the registrar told me to turn down this street.
Yeah.
Okay, anything more on signage right now? Shall we move on to Juneteenth? Which is a Wednesday this year. Dan?
Well, this is what your calendar looks like, right? I just did a quick snap of the calendar, and you can see Canvas starts on the 19th and goes down through the 25th. Actually, maybe the 24th. But anyway, Juneteenth sits on the 19th. So The city office will be closed, the advisory we've got from the elect is, you can close if you want, but it doesn't change any of the deadlines you have to hit. So I imagine, as a city office, we would close on the 19th, to the public coming in, other than, Kansas, should you choose to continue to Kansas. Yeah.
As I recall, this last canvas, we met on Wednesday and didn't have anything else to do until the following Monday. So unless this is a whole lot bigger,
Well, we have the problem that the state will not vet the same day voters until the end of the week.
Right, we're required to put in all the SDRs by the 21st, by the end of the day on the 21st.
Right,
So we have to get that part done.
and we can't complete the canvas until that's done.
Yeah, because they can do the report on Saturday, and then we look at the report on,
So we had to carry the canvas over until Monday.
yeah, Canvas has to go over to them.
And in fact, that was the lion's share of what we did.
you know. My point is, so far as Canvas was concerned, in March, we met one day, and then we didn't meet again until the following Monday. So if it's similar, then we could meet 1 or even 1.5 days, depending upon how much we have.
In June, it shouldn't have much. It's hard to predict, but it shouldn't be enormously heavy.
Well, presidential was pretty much cut and dried. Everybody knew who was going to win on both sides. But for this one, I know the congressional race on the Republican side is probably going to be pretty hot and heavy. And I'm fairly certain that Ward 4 on the Republican side is going to be fairly hot and heavy.
Right.
And if there's a Senate primary, I think there's 3 candidates that
Either
have.
side, yeah.
Yeah, so, it will probably be more,
Then the presidential election.
yeah, for those reasons, which is another reason, take a look at how many ballots we get.
Yeah,
But I think, if we just, now, are you gonna, in
Well-
order to get your SDRs in, are you gonna have your people working on the 19th?
That's the question.
well, right, so I think, first question is, do you want to work as Canvas on the 19th?
I don't,
And if we're working as
I don't
Canvas,
see that we necessarily
I
have
thought
to
the
do
code
it.
required it to be started by 5 o'clock the day after the election. Is that what it is, 5 o'clock?
I think so.
so.
Yeah, and
I
you
think
just
it's
said, the holiday does not change deadlines.
So my understanding
Change
from the
the code.
advisory, we can double check the advisory from the elect, is that they said you may take the 19th and not, meet for Canvas. But you still have to hit all of the deadlines.
I think we can decide that in June as to whether we start canvas on the.
Or in May?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I would like to see by May, because remember, we have to send out a provisional notice, right? And we have to make sure that we give, maybe you can decide it by June, maybe we can get.
No, I'm saying May 2nd,
Yeah.
our board meeting. We can decide.
Because we're gonna have to tell voters when they're gonna show up, if they're gonna show up.
Right now, let's check the advisories and the law.
Okay.
Whether we-
I'll send along what I got, and you guys can review that.
Okay, so we can table this until our next meeting, see what we do. I'm fine with that.
Let's move on to relocation of precinct 301 from the library. The problem here is that the library is outside the boundaries of precinct of Ward 3, Ward 3.
Ward 3, correct.
So we're looking, and we've had a volunteer of a place.
Yeah,
You want to speak to that, Steve?
Love and Truth Church. I got an email from a member of the board there who said that their church is willing to serve as a precinct, as a polling place for us. They are located on Ford Avenue. If you see where the stadium is there, just below Wythe Street.
Yep.
They're on the other side of Ford Avenue, across from the stadium. I'm not sure if they're exactly across, but they're really close to the stadium. And I've been into the space for other events. It's a big room. There are restrooms there. There's a little kitchenette there for for the election officers. I believe it's ADA compliant. I have not checked it out with the fishing scale. And I didn't have any trouble getting over it. I think
The
it's,
lip, yeah.
I think it's flat to the pavement outside. There's parking directly across from the door. There's a lot of parking around the back. And I believe that's West Lynchburg Baptist, not Westlake
I'm
Baptist.
sorry, West Lynchburg, you're right, that's a
But,
typo on my part.
So I have not been into, I was in the church years ago. I have not looked at the place there.
You're
So I,
talking about the truth.
well, no, I'm comparing between the two, but I do know that Love and Truth Church on Ford Avenue has volunteered to serve as a polling place. I'm under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that West Lynchburg Baptist wanted to know why we weren't using them instead of the library. Is that?
Yeah, so
am I confused?
under the previous administration, there was a proposal to actually move 202 to the library and then move the library, I'm sorry, 202 to the library and then 301 over to West Lynchburg Baptist.
Where
That
is 202 right now?
It's in Robert Payne School, which I'm sorry, it's not on this map, but it's over toward the top corner.
RS.
Yeah, it's on 12th Street. So if you follow 12th Street up, where you see, if you keep going up, it's on 12th Street, 12th and, yeah, Floyd is right, 12th, that's it, 12th and Floyd. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about two of them.
Yes.
Well, at that point, right, at that point, the argument was made that 202 was not situated the best, and so the library was proposed as a replacement for 202, but that also meant that you had to move 301 from the library, and West Lynchburg Baptist Church was proposed as a, so there's two precincts they were talking about.
Is it West Lynchburg
No, it's
or
West
West
Lynchburg,
Lake?
I'm sorry, it was West Lynchburg. It's
Okay, that's
my
what I thought.
fault. Sorry,
Okay.
my
Yeah,
fault.
West Lynchburg.
So did West Lynchburg come to us or were we planning to approach them?
So my understanding, so the way this got on the list here for discussion today was Jeff Helgeson came to the Community Affairs Department, Martin, talked to him about moving it, talked to the pastor in West Lynchburg. Then he called me and said, hey, I'd like to see if we can move the precinct from the library over to West Lynchburg. And my answer to him was, well, let me put it in front of the Electoral Board and see what their pleasure is. Now, Jeff has not come back to me and talked to me about it again, so I don't know, I don't know why he asked that question or why, he was.
Okay, so it wasn't the church itself that approached us?
It wasn't the church. He told me the church said they would be happy to do it. I hadn't talked to the church until you guys,
Okay,
made your thoughts known.
and I have no idea what prompted Love and Truth to approach us. I just know that they did.
Right.
Which I think is a very good sign.
Well, the question is, how do we proceed here? I like the idea of the library as a precinct because it works pretty well. And it might be worth changing from Payne to the library because the layout of precincts in Ward 2 might be better in some ways for voters.
Julie has a thought?
My only concern with that is there is a large amount of our voter base that goes to RSP and that walks there. So my slight counter suggestion is potentially on our list of backup places, to look at who that backup is and see if maybe how close they are to RSP and if they're still walkable and see if they would be interested.
Well, I
Because I know,
don't think.
like,
I don't think the issue is replacing our opinion necessarily, because they aren't a bad place to go. It was a little bit squeezed in this last time because school was in session. But I don't see sentiment to replace Payne. It's just that we're talking about these precincts in Ward 3
yeah.
and
Yes,
what to do about the library.
it's College Hill Baptist Church and it's a block away.
Yeah, that's what would be my suggestion
Yeah.
if that were to be a discussion, just because
for-
I know
for
that
the West.
probably at least half.
Paint's back at this college.
I don't see a need to replace paint at this point. I think we're talking, we should discuss how we reach out to possibly 2 locations in Ward 3 down West Lynchburg and Love and Truth.
So West Lynchburg though is on the same road, it's just a couple blocks away, right, from the
Yeah,
library.
they're both on Memorial.
Yes, we go through more.
Yeah.
Carolyn had a thought
I
here.
lost the thread here. Is the basic issue is that the library as a precinct is no longer in the correct
Correct.
location for it to be a precinct. It's out of the precinct.
With redistricting, they moved the lines around,
Yeah.
so,
So the library actually does, the 301 that lives at the library right now really does need to be moved.
ideally, it should be moved, I mean, to make everything line up,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so, and then there are 2 options that we know of.
Correct.
This West Lynchburg and then this Love and Truth Church. So, but I think Julie's point is very well taken. Payne is a community polling place, a very strong community polling place, and should not be moved, but I don't want us to talk about it. I don't think the board should talk about it.
Well, I think that point is very well taken.
Yeah.
So,
And
thank you for
I don't
clarifying.
think that's what we're here to discuss.
No,
Is to-
I just, the previous administration had that in some notes somewhere, so I tossed it
Yeah,
out.
but the question then is, should we reach out to these 2 places? Should we investigate any others before our next meeting?
I would suggest that the only other facility in there, in that particular precinct is probably Fort Hill United Methodist. We've had no communication with them. And they are right on the border of Ward 4. So someone has approached West Lynchburg and they said, fine if you want to come. And then Love and Truth approached us and said, we want you to come. So I think at this point, we should go and check out the facilities at both places and make sure that they are, whatever the facility is ADA compliant.
Who is?
Who owns it? Who owns 301? Whoever owns 301.
Precinct is 301.
Whose precinct is 301? I know whose precinct it is. It's mine.
I mean, I don't mind going.
As is RS Paint, for that matter, and the library.
Frankly, I could walk to both of those churches, but it's not my precinct. I'd be happy to do it, but it's your,
No,
Sure.
Dan, if you, Steve, Doc, if you could give me contact information that you know of, Dan, if you could
Yeah.
give me contact information.
Yep.
I can do some initial contact
Okay,
and see what, I'm not an expert on it. But.
yeah, that's fine, I can go over, I can prep you on that one. It's not a complicated, it's
you
a-
wouldn't have to go by yourself. You could enter
yeah,
out.
I can go with you, that's fine, happy to
Be happy to. Like I said, I can walk to both of those churches.
Okay, any further discussion of that? I think the impetus here is not necessarily motion, but to investigate those 2 locations,
Yeah,
if they're possible.
Yeah.
Is there any other new business?
we're going to say training until the next meeting schedule.
The discussion of backup precinct for 401.
At this point, I sent him a copy of that letter that you all, that I sent you first and you responded to it. I sent him a copy of that letter coming from me. I did not leave it third person. I made it come from me. And he had a meeting with his board on Sunday afternoon. He's off on Monday. And so I haven't had a chance to talk with him. He hasn't been in the office to call me back. So we'll see how that flies.
Look at that as part of the agenda item. So,
I hope we have an answer by then.
okay. Hearing no more new business. Yes, that's what
Sorry, I thought you were gonna dismiss us, but I mean, I wasn't gonna complain about that either.
Our secretary is moving slow.
What?
It's now the time for public comments. Does anybody have a public comment?
I just have a question. We had a problem with the mail-in ballot, never arriving in our home. So when are the mail-in ballots going to be mailed out for the primary in June?
They get mailed out at the same time early voting starts, so that Friday will be there. I'll submit to the vendor that we have mailing out.
Depends on when they're.
Give me your information and I will look it up to see if we have the correct address and make sure that we have everything correct in our system. And then I will see what I can do.
Okay, I think it was a post office thing, because I think your office did everything right.
Okay.
And I had come down to fill out a paper and got it and dropped it in.
Yep.
Didn't depend on the mail, so I just want to make sure when to expect.
Is there any announcement on public media, like next door, other, the city, websites about the opening of public voting, early voting?
Yeah, so I have it all on, we have it posted at the registrar's office. We also have it posted on our website. And I think on social media, we also have it posted.
Good.
And the news also.
And
The news also does it.
Good. Okay, any other public comments?
Do you expect to have observers, party observers during the primary? Election officials or.
authorized representatives during the primary?
Pardon?
Authorized representatives at the primary. Yeah,
We would
Sure.
like them.
sure.
Yes, very definitely, and this is a dual primary probably.
Possibly, yeah.
So it's going to be observers from both.
Do you anticipate going over regulations and what is expected and that sort of thing?
We have always, and I thought the parties were aware, but we have always invited anyone who's planning to be an authorized representative to come to our trainings, at least the lecture parts where we go over all of the rules and what to expect. So an authorized representative is welcome to come. Matter of fact, the public is welcome to come to our trainings. Just, we don't have the capacity for them to be on the hands-on, but they can definitely be there.
Dan, we give notice to the party representatives of our trainings.
Yes, I will add them, so what I'll do is I'll put together a calendar invite when we decide that training time. And I will add the party chairs on that. I can certainly add your email as well. I know Jeff's on some of those notifications. I can add yours if you like. That's fine.
We'll be deciding those training dates at our May 2nd meeting. Then we'll be setting up those.
I raised the question because I was working outside when polls as a volunteer during the last election. And somebody came from inside the precinct and walked around a while and then went back in. And I went in and used the bathroom and I looked at the door and I saw this person walking. It looked like the precinct was set up so you checked in and you got your ballot and you marked your vote and then you went and then you put it in and then you left and this person was walking around. And so I was really wondering what kind of restrictions are put on what an
An authorized
representative can do.
I
I
mean-
think I remember having to sit in a chair and be very quiet.
Well, right, I mean, not to disrupt, but to be honestly, we have actually I put up on the website that 4-hour, 2-hour, whatever it was, lecture that we did. Those slides are up on the website. So if you want, you can actually certainly look at that anytime you like. So go to my website, lynchburg.va.gov/registrar. And then underneath there, you're gonna see Electoral Board. You go to Electoral Board, you can see Election Officer, and you'll go down there and you'll see I actually have the PowerPoints that we've used for training in a PDF format on that. So you can just click it and download it, and you can look at it. And a lot of the information about, authorized representatives is part of that whole PDF that's there. So it's a starting point anyway.
I don't know whether the person was an election official either.
Yeah, and I don't know what exactly they were doing, but, you can look at that and that kind of gives you an outline of what they should or shouldn't have been doing.
Any other comments, concerns?
Yeah, I'll go ahead if there's nobody else. I thought I'd go last. On signage, the blue signs by the parking area to the left of the registrar's office say parking for voter registration.
Yep.
And when I was doing early voting campaigning last year, some voters thought that they couldn't park there because they weren't registering, they were voting.
Yeah.
So maybe the signs could be changed to say something like parking for voter registration and voting.
Yeah, so, obviously that's up to the city, so we'd have to go back to the city and ask them to make that change. What we do to try to help with that, although, the sign is there, so people might read it, think like you say, we actually have a voter parking sandwich board that we put out during early voting right in front of those spots. So, it's conflicting signage, I realize that, but hopefully, they see voter parking and they realize they can vote, but we're trying to be very conscientious about getting that sign, that sandwich board out there for that reason. But yeah, it's something we could maybe take up with city council or the city.
I think the simplest solution would just be signs say registrar's office parking. And that way, for whatever reason you need to go to the registrar's office, that's where your parking is. And then they can park any place else around there, but that's set aside for that. And I'm just thinking out loud on this. Do we have the contact information on the authorized representatives that turned in their forms to the chiefs? Is there contact information on those authorization forms or just?
For contact for them, so they turn in their form.
Well, where I'm going with this is, if we wanted to send a notice of training and invite authorized representatives, do we have a way of contacting the ones that have been authorized representatives before? Or do we just, would it be wiser just to go through the parties and be done?
Yeah, so,
I'm just thinking out loud.
I'm cautious about trying to maintain that mailing list on our side, just because that list could vary, and I'm hopeful that the chairs know who they want to have
Yeah.
that information.
Like I said, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah,
If it's a
understood.
bad thought, I'm fine with it. I was just curious.
Any further comments? Any further business? Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So moved and seconded, all in favor?
All right.
Thank you very much.